If you're watching this right now, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe, like, and share to support the channel, because this story is about how power, cruelty, and fate can twist together in ways no one expects. The day it all began. The sun was exploding over the billionaire's mansion like it was trying to warn them of the storm coming. Maya, the black maid, who had worked for billionaire Richard Halden for 7 years, walked through the marble hallways with that quiet dignity she always carried, even within a place that often treated her as invisible. Her daughter Aaliyah, a bright 10-year-old who loved books more than toys, sat in the corner of the estate garden reading a worn-out science magazine, while Maya polished the glass railings. Richard Halden, owner of Halden International, investor in half the city, man whose ego often arrived before he did, stepped out into the courtyard with a glass of scotch even though it was barely noon. Beside him, his spoiled teenage son, Tucker, strutted with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. The mansion had always been a place where Maya walked on eggshells, but today felt worse. As if a thin crack under everything was slowly widening. Richard had guests coming that afternoon, powerful investors from Dubai. The entire household staff was under pressure, though no one more than Maya. She had been forced into overtime all week, scrubbing the guest wing, preparing the dining hall, doing everything while still minding Aaliyah, since she had no childcare for the weekend. Richard hated having Aaliyah around during important days, but Maya had no choice. The piranha pool, an extravagant, grotesque status symbol, sat shimmering behind the mansion, hidden under thick glass that allowed Richard to brag about the deadly creatures hovering beneath. It was his favorite toy to show off. He would tap the glass and smirk as the sleek bodies darted through the water like living knives. Maya hated that pool. Even when she walked past it quickly, her heart beat a little faster. Aaliyah was curious and bright, liked to sit near the garden edge, but Maya always reminded her never to go near the glass pool. Not because Aaliyah would disobey, but because the place was sinister and cold, as if it wanted someone to fall in. This morning, Tucker spotted Aaliyah reading and rolled his eyes exaggeratedly. "Why is she even here?" he muttered loud enough for Maya to hear. "This isn't a daycare." Richard laughed instead of correcting his son. "Her mother can clean and babysit at the same time. Efficiency. That's what people like her are good for." Maya kept her head down, her jaw tight. She had learned long ago that swallowing disrespect was the only way to survive in this house. But Aaliyah heard, and for the first time Maya saw something change in her daughter's eyes. Not sadness, but anger, quiet and controlled. The guests began arriving in their luxury cars, each one more expensive than the last, and the mansion buzzed with artificial charm. Richard, always desperate to appear larger than life, guided them through the estate like a proud monarch. When they approached the glass pool, he puffed up. "I imported these piranhas myself," he boasted, tapping the glass again. "Hundreds of thousands of dollars just for maintenance. They react to movement. Smart creatures." He tapped again, harder this time, making the investors laugh as the water rippled and the silver bodies flashed beneath. Maya, sweeping nearby, paused for just a second, her stomach tightening. Something didn't feel right about today. Something electric and dangerous hung in the air. Aaliyah finished her book and wandered closer to where her mother worked, staying far from the pool like she always did. But Tucker caught sight of her again and smirked. The boy had his father's arrogance, but none of his control. He leaned over to his father and whispered something. Richard's eyes flicked toward Aaliyah, then toward Maya, and he grinned as if sharing a private joke. "Watch this," Richard said to his guests in a low voice, one of those tones that made Maya clench her teeth. He walked toward the edge where Aaliyah stood. Maya froze. He wouldn't. He couldn't. But Richard thrived on humiliation, on spectacle, on proving power, and Aaliyah, with her innocent eyes and second-hand clothes, made the perfect target for his cruelty. Richard stopped a few feet from her, pretending his voice was warm. "What are you reading there, sweetheart?" Aaliyah held up the magazine, her hands steady. "It's about ecosystems," she said softly. "They have an article on river predators." Richard let out a loud laugh, startling her. "River predators?" Oh, you'd like the ones we have here. He gestured flamboyantly toward the pool. The investors chuckled politely, not understanding his intention yet. Maya stepped forward quickly. Sir, please? She's just a child. Richard raised a hand without looking at her. Maya, stay out of this. Something cold dripped down her spine. Aaliyah stayed still, sensing tension, but not fear yet. Richard moved behind her, too close. Maya saw it before anyone else understood. The way his shoulders tucked forward, the shift of his weight, the sudden glint of mischief, but sharper, malicious, ugly. Richard, Maya said again, her voice trembling. Please, don't. But her words dissolved in the air. The guests had begun turning their heads, curious and entertained. Tucker crossed his arms, grinning. And in one horrifying second, Richard gripped the back of Aaliyah's shoulders and shoved. Maya screamed her daughter's name. Investors gasped. But Aaliyah didn't fall into the water. Instead, her small hands hit the glass edge hard, and she tumbled into a narrow ledge just above the piranha chamber. Her legs dangled inches above the deadly water, and the movement sent the fish into a frenzy. They sliced through the pool beneath her in frantic patterns, their fins flickering like blades in the sun. The guests stepped back, some shouting, some unsure if it was a demonstration or disaster. Richard stumbled a step forward, suddenly realizing what he'd actually done, not a harmless prank, but the kind of cruelty that could destroy him publicly, legally, morally. He hadn't meant for her to actually slip. His face drained of color. Aaliyah froze on the ledge, gripping the glass with white knuckles. The sound of the thrashing water rose like a monster waking up. Maya ran, dropping everything, sliding on the marble as she reached the pool's edge. Don't move, baby. I'm here, she cried, her voice cracking. Fear surged through the crowd. The investors began filming, whispering, horrified or fascinated. It was hard to tell. And Richard, the man who moments earlier had shown off the pool with smug pride, suddenly stepped back, shaking his head, whispering, "Oh God, oh God." As the reality of what he'd done slammed into him, he looked at the guests, at their expressions changing from amusement to disgust, shock, outrage. Tucker's smirk disappeared, replaced with wide-eyed terror. Maya reached out, her hands trembling violently, trying to grab her daughter's arm, but the ledge was too far. She needed to climb down, but one slip would send them both into the feeding chamber. The water below churned with silver flashes and snapping sounds that didn't need to be seen to be understood. The danger was real. Time was slipping. And the billionaire who caused it stood paralyzed, his arrogance shattering in front of everyone. As the child he had pushed hovered one wrong movement away from becoming the headline that would ruin him forever. That was the moment Richard Halden, the man who never apologized, never hesitated, never feared anything, fell to his knees. Please, he whispered to Maya, to anyone, to God, please. Someone help her. But no one moved. No one except Maya, whose trembling hands reached again toward her daughter as the pool rumbled beneath them, the entire world hanging by a thread of glass. Maya's breath came in short, terrified bursts as she reached toward Aaliyah, her fingers stretching until her joints ached. But the ledge was still just out of reach. And beneath her daughter, the water rippled with violent hunger as the piranhas swarmed in chaotic circles, sensing movement, sensing possibility. And for a second, Maya felt as though she were standing inside a nightmare she couldn't wake from. The investors were frozen in a grotesque half-ring around the pool, some with their phones out, others whispering in disbelief. And Richard Halden, billionaire, king of the estate, man who once claimed he never feared consequences, was on his knees with a look on his face that Maya had never seen before. Pure terror. Tucker stood behind him, pale and shaking, the bravado gone, replaced with the realization that his father's joke had turned into a moment that could end everything. The sun beat down on the glass, heating it, making Aaliyah's palms slippery as she held herself up, and Maya knew she didn't have seconds to waste. She scanned the edge of the pool with frantic, darting eyes, trying to calculate a way to reach her daughter without falling in. The glass pool was designed like an underground tank with a sealed top and a maintenance. platform tucked behind a narrow access gate on the opposite side. A gate Maya would never be allowed to touch under normal circumstances. But there were no normal circumstances now. One slip, one mistake, and Aaliyah would drop to the water below. And Maya would rather die herself than let that happen. She ran along the perimeter, ignoring Richard calling her name like he had any right to speak to her, ignoring the guests shouting instructions, ignoring the rising hum of the piranha smashing their sleek bodies against the surface as they reacted to Alia's trembling legs. She reached the maintenance gate and pulled with all her strength. Locked. She slammed her fist against it, letting out a raw sound that barely sounded human. Behind her, Richard stumbled forward and grabbed her arm. Let me find the key. I'll get it," he stuttered, rummaging through his pockets with shaking hands, the irony not lost on anyone that the man who created this dangerous display now couldn't open the very gate meant for safety. Maya shoved past him, her instincts sharper than logic. She spotted the toolbox left by the groundskeeper. Earlier that morning, one of the few times luck seemed to be on her side, and she grabbed the rusted crowbar from inside. She jammed it into the gate lock, using a strength she didn't know she had, and pried with everything in her body. The metal shrieked like an animal, but didn't give. Sweat dripped into her eyes as she gritted her teeth and pulled. Harder, harder, until something snapped, and the gate flew open with such force she stumbled forward. She didn't even feel the pain in her elbow as she hit the ground. She only saw Aaliyah clinging desperately. Her small body shaking with exhaustion, Maya climbed onto the narrow maintenance platform, which was barely wider than her feet. And the height difference made her stomach drop. The glass ledge where Aaliyah was trapped was nearly 2 feet lower. And one wrong movement would send either one of them crashing through the glass panel. She crouched low, inching toward her daughter. "Baby, listen to me," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear clawing inside her. "Don't look down. Just look at me. Keep looking at me." Leah's eyes were wide, brimming with tears she refused to let fall, because even now she was trying to be brave. "Mommy, I can't hold on," she whispered, her voice trembling. Maya reached one arm down, stretching until her shoulders screamed in pain. "Give me your hand, Aaliyah. Right now. You're not falling. Do you hear me? You're not falling." Aaliyah shifted one hand from the ledge, trusting her mother fully, and for a terrifying second her foot slipped, scraping against the glass, sending a crackling echo that made everyone gasp. The piranhas surged wildly beneath her. Maya lunged forward, catching her daughter's wrist with a grip so tight it burned. She pulled, muscles straining, her entire body shaking as she lifted Aaliyah upward, inch by inch, until finally the girl's torso cleared the ledge, and Maya used her other arm to hook around her waist and drag her fully onto the platform. Aaliyah collapsed against her, shaking violently, and Maya closed her eyes for a moment, letting the relief wash over her, but only for a moment, because suddenly the thin metal beneath her shifted with a deep groan. The maintenance platform wasn't built for 2 people, certainly not for the way Maya had lunged onto it, and the force had destabilized one of the bolts. She felt the metal dip under their combined weight, and she wrapped her body around her daughter instinctively, shielding her as the platform tilted downward at a dangerous angle. Gasps erupted behind her. Someone screamed, "It's collapsing." Tucker shouted, as if stating the obvious helped. Richard stumbled forward again, his entire face drenched in panic. And for a second, Maya thought he might actually try to help. But he stayed rooted where he was, frozen, worthless, terrified more for his reputation than for her or her daughter. Maya dug her feet into the metal and pressed her back to the wall behind her, using what little leverage she had to steady the platform. She looked around desperately for a way out, but the maintenance gate was too far, the ledge too narrow, and her hands too full, holding the trembling child clinging to her neck. Then a voice cut through the chaos deep, firm, authoritative. "Hold on. I'm coming." It was Luis, the head groundskeeper, who had worked on the estate even longer than Maya. He had been out by the far property line when he heard the screams. He sprinted toward the pool, dropped to his knees, and grabbed the cable pulley used for lowering feeding equipment into the pool. one of the very tools Richard had forbidden the staff from touching in front of guests. Luis ignored him, anchored the rope around the railing, and tossed the loose end toward Maya. "Tie it around her." "Now," he shouted. Maya shifted Aaliyah, looping one arm around her tightly while she grabbed the rope with her free hand and secured it around her daughter's waist. "Pull her up slow." Maya yelled and Luis nodded, bracing himself as he and another staff member lifted Aaliyah carefully, hand over hand, until she reached the edge of the glass pool where two of the investors helped pull her the rest of the way. Once Aaliyah was safe and wrapped in a woman's blazer, crying but unhurt, Maya let herself breathe for the first time since the nightmare began, but she was still on the collapsing platform. The metal beneath her shuddered again, sounding like it might snap entirely, and she knew she had to move before it plunged into the water below. Luis threw the rope back down. "Your turn," he shouted, but Maya shook her head. The angle was too steep, and she didn't have the leverage. She needed to climb, not be pulled. With slow, deliberate movements, she shifted onto her hands and knees and began crawling across the tilted platform. Every sound felt amplified: the churn of the piranhas, the groans of the bolts, frantic whispers of the guests, and Richard's shallow breathing behind them all. When she reached the edge, she lunged upward, gripping the top of the pool's outer ledge, her fingers slipping from sweat, and she hoisted herself just enough for Luis and an investor to grab her arms and lift her out. She collapsed onto the stone deck, panting, her entire body trembling with leftover fear. The guests backed away from Richard, horrified and disgusted, whispering among themselves. His power had always been wrapped in a facade of control, but now the facade was shattered. He approached Maya, shaking so badly he could barely stand. Maya, I didn't mean." She rose to her feet slowly, her eyes cold, her voice steady. "You pushed my daughter," she said, not shouting, not crying, just stating the truth with the force of a hammer. "You put her life in danger." Richard swallowed hard, guilt twisting his features. "Please don't call the police. I can fix this. I can pay." The words sounded pathetic, cheap, hollow. Maya didn't even respond. She walked past him, straight to Aaliyah, scooping her daughter into her arms as the girl buried her face in her shoulder and sobbed. The investors exchanged looks of disgust, and one of them, a stern man with a thick accent, spoke aloud. "Richard, what you did, it was monstrous." Another added, "We won't be part of business with a man who treats human life like a toy." One by one, they turned their backs on him. Deals worth millions evaporated in minutes. Tucker tried to speak, but his voice cracked with shame, and as the sun lowered behind the mansion, painting the sky in red streaks, Maya walked away with her daughter in her arms, not knowing that this moment was just the beginning. Because Richard Halden, billionaire, humiliated and terrified, was about to do something that would change the rest of their lives forever. A cold gust hit her as soon as she stepped into the hallway. Maya froze. The mansion was supposed to be silent, sealed tight under lockdown, but someone had opened the east wing door. She moved slowly, every breath tight in her chest. The security lights flickered, casting long shadows across the polished floor. From somewhere deep within the corridor came the faint hum of machinery, the same sound she heard the night they tried to bury Mr. Castellan alive. Her stomach twisted. Not again. She followed the sound until she reached the service elevator, the one the staff used. Its panel lights were on. The elevator was moving. Coming up, Maya stepped back, gripping the railing on the wall. When the door slid open, she expected a stranger, an intruder, or worse. But instead was Mr. Castellan. Only he wasn't dressed for bed, and he wasn't confused or injured. He stepped out wearing a dark coat, gloves, and an expression she had never seen before. Something guarded. Something calculating, Maya, he said softly, as if he had been expecting her. "You shouldn't be awake." Her pulse hammered. "What's going on? Why is the security system down? Who came in?" He looked at her for a long moment, too long. "No one came in," he said. "I turned everything off." That chilled her more than any intruder could have. "Why?" she whispered. He walked past her, heading toward the east wing. Not bothering to hide the keycard, he slipped into his pocket, one she had never seen before because, he said without turning around, "There are things in this house I don't want anyone discovering. Not even you." The hallway air thickened with tension, and then he said one last thing, something that made her knees weaken. "Stay out of the east wing." If you value your life, Maya didn't obey. She waited for him to disappear around the corner, then stepped quietly after him, whatever he was hiding. Whatever secret he thought she couldn't handle. She was about to uncover it